All right. Hey, everyone. Happy Sunday. Happy February. Thank you so much for being here. Um, welcome to our session. We're here for our live sacred space session, now monthly, for the month of February. And just really thrilled to be here with everyone. As always, I'm honored to be here with you in this time of sensitivity and uncertainty. And I look forward to sharing time with you in our sacred space together today. So we'll get started. So the things we're going to do in our time together here today is number one, we'll go through the process of setting sacred space together. And then once we're in sacred space, we will have our overall topic for the session. And the topic this month will be the mechanics of self-sabotage. The mechanics of self-sabotage. Okay. And then after that, we'll have a bit of an exercise. I think we're going to read a poem actually today as well. And then we will close sacred space. Okay. So I'll go ahead and start the process of setting our sacred space. And to do that, I'll start by saying, let me just make sure this doesn't fall off the table. Our intention here is that we would like to create a space which is devoid of fear, threat, and control, okay, which is how we define the sacred. In order for us to open to higher guidance from within our own selves, right? However we define that. So it could be a muse that we follow, or just flashes of brilliant insight, intuition, hairs on the back of our neck, sort of good ideas we get in the shower or on a long run. However we tend to get guidance, but from within our own selves, right? Not from the outside. A safe sanctuary space for us to be able to relax and surrender, be in this sort of state of surrender with no feeling of danger or threat. Okay. So that we can partake together and individually of the nourishment, the emotional nourishment and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being in sacred space together as a group. Okay. And in opening sacred space today, I will propose, as I do every session, that we all follow the 4 principles of proceeding in sacred space. The first, of course, is confidentiality. Standard Vegas rules: what happens in sacred space stays in sacred space. Now, that's the rule we use when we're in person. When I sort of travel all around to meet with all of you in your countries and sort of get together. Hopefully we'll be able to do that soon again. Fingers crossed. But here online, because the stream is public, because the replay will be public, the way we handle confidentiality is via anonymization. So you don't have to be anonymous, but if you would like to be anonymous, you would come into the probably the Crowdcast stream, log in, and then go into edit profile, and then just change your username to Harry Potter, Mickey Mouse, what have you, and then come back and continue chatting, asking questions. But again, you don't have to participate. We'll get to that in a moment. But that's how we handle confidentiality when we're on a public online stream. The second principle is that we try as much as possible to refrain from giving out any feeling of threat, of controlling, of hostility, of course, but even sort of well-intentioned threat and controlling. So fixing, tough love, finger wagging, right? This is going to hurt you more than it hurts me, right? So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, but it's just that's not how we do it here. That's not how we do it here, right? There are certain things that you can only get done when you're in sacred space. Like there are only certain things you can get done when you go to the bank, when you go to the airport, and those tend to be controlled spaces for that purpose. And in exactly the same way, we set sacred space, not because it is superior to profane space, but because there are certain things you can only really get done, right, in sacred space. So we try to set it, keep it clean, sacred space, so that we can do our thing. And at the end of an hour or two or whatever, then we can go back to our regular mostly, in the modern world, profane, profane lives, right? And that's okay. That's, in this era of time, what is it, like the fourth yuga, right? It is what it is. Here we are. Okay. So here we are holding space for each other to be afraid, to be anxious, or to be happy and relaxed, however you are. And however you find yourself, we're okay with that. We just hold space for it. So the third principle is that a corollary to the first two, where there is no commerce in sacred space. So nothing may be sold in sacred space. I cannot sell you anything. Yaoi cannot sell you anything. My editor, who will be on screen in a moment. Please refrain from selling things to each other in the chat, wherever we're chatting here on Crowdcast or Facebook. And that includes recommendations, right? So even if, like, I recommend a book, right, and I'm not getting any financial compensation for it, we even refrain from that, because the point is not whether someone's making money or not. The point is that there is a kind of well-intentioned, veiled threat, right? If you're like, oh, I'm having trouble with anxiety, and it's like, well, you should try this book, right? I don't even know the guy who wrote it, right? But this book really helped me, and you should do that too. So even though it's well-intentioned, the dynamics there is that you feel this threat. It's like, oh my gosh, like if I don't read this book, I may lose out. I may have fear of missing out. I may not get my anxiety fixed. So we feel that clench of fear, threat, and control. And again, there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that. It may actually fix all your problems, right? But in sacred space, we try to avoid those physics, so that we can get the things done that we get done in sacred space. Said another way, this is a space where we are here for your energy, not for the things you bring, right? We're here for the essence of what you are, not for the value add you bring or for what you do or provide. Okay. So in commerce, it's not what I'm going to sell you. And for you, it's not like what you're going to sort of give me in return. So that's the third principle. And the fourth principle, another corollary, is that there is no expectation of participation, right? So no fear, threat, and control means there is no pressure to do anything. You can chat, you can not chat, you can ask questions, you can not ask questions. Even if you try to sell stuff, we're not going to sort of shame you. We're just going to be like, okay, we're just trying to hold this space to do these things. Everybody just, try your best. Try your best. Okay. Because again, the nourishment comes from the held space and our collective presence and attention. Again, from what you are, not from what you do or provide. And all of us together here will tend to amplify that. Okay. So this is what I propose. And if you are not okay with that, that's totally okay. There's no fear, threat, and control to get you to come to sacred space, to get you to stay in sacred space. We'll still be friends, afterward in profane space. If you're on my email list, I will still send you emails, right? But in the next few moments, we will be crossing the threshold into our sacred space together. And if you are not okay with that, that's okay. We're going to pause right now and just give you a moment to withdraw from the group if that's sort of your choice. Totally okay. So I'll just pause right now to give everyone a moment to dial that in and make your sovereign choice and selection. Okay. Okay. Good. So now for the rest of us here, we will now move forward together into our shared sacred space. And as we cross the threshold into our shared sacred space, I will just gently remind everyone, myself included, that we are in a space here where we are, to the best of our ability, observing the four principles of sacred space: confidentiality / anonymization, no fear, threat, or control, no fixing, no tough love, no commerce, no recommendations, and no expectation of participation. All right. Welcome back. Welcome back to our sacred space, everyone. It's so good to be here. Now that we're doing these monthly, I find I'm missing it, after sort of, 2 or 3 weeks. I'm like, when is our next sacred space? So it's really nice to be back here with you, and thank you for being here with us and holding the space with us. Okay, so on to our topic. So our topic this month is the mechanics of self-sabotage. So for our mythic brainstorm, right, when Gary and I sort of get on a call and she brings a story that her muse has brought to her, and then she reads it to me, and my first reaction is like, what even is this? And then we work it through and see where the golden thread leads us. We came across a rather obscure African folktale that led us into these questions around the mechanics of self-sabotage within us, right? How does self-sabotage happen? Why does it tend to happen again and again and again? What is the deeper meaning, right, of self-sabotage? When our plans don't come to fruition, when money flow is not what we hope for, when our bodies don't cooperate, right? We have these grand plans and our body just sort of breaks down or we lose energy. What is the deeper cause for self-sabotage in one's life? And what can we do to clear it? Okay. So to lead us through this, I'll ask Gary to come on screen and maybe tell us about the story she's selected. Gary, if you're there.
Hi, Artie.
Hello. Welcome back.
Me? Yeah, hi.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right.
Yeah. So we've got a Zimbabwean story this time. It's from the Shona tradition, and it comes from a book called The Broken Promise and Other Traditional Fables from Zimbabwe. So that's the title of the book. I had to find it on the Internet Archive because it's out of print. So it's it's a fascinating collection of folk tales from Zimbabwe. And this particular story was just it's so simple, but it felt so deep and profound. So I had to choose that.
Wonderful. I love it.
Should I start the story?
Yeah, would you? I'm excited to hear it again.
Right.
Okay.
So the story is called The Magic Drums. And long ago, in a certain village in Zimbabwe, there was a young girl named Kuda who loved little children. And according to storytellers, Kuda had poor health from the time she was born. She couldn't go out to work in the fields. Even regular things that other people did, she was too weak to do them. So instead of going out to work, the women of the village gave her their babies to look after while they went out working. So Kuda was very good at this. She loved playing with the babies. She loved comforting them when they were sad. So most women, would have been grateful to Kuda for looking after their babies when they were busy, but the village women were not. They criticized Kuda because, she was not strong enough to work. And they said, looking after babies is not an important task. It's only for someone who can't do any other work. So in the evening, when the women of the village, sat together near the fire, they often made cruel jokes about Kuda. They laughed at her. They said, your body's weak, you're so thin, your arms and legs are so thin. And all of this made Kuda really miserable. So the little girl, usually would just run away to her lonely house. She'd spend the whole night weeping because, all the cruel things that the women would say to her. But there was one thing which the village women did not know about Kuda, and that was that she had great skill in magic. And many years before, when her father was dying, he had given her 3 magic drums. And he said to her, whenever you beat these drums, all living creatures, whoever hears the sound, will run to obey your wishes. But Kuda did not beat her magic drums very often. She was usually far too busy looking after the children of the village. But on the days when the women were not working and they were with their children, that's when she could run away to a quiet place in the bush and then beat her 3 drums. And when she did this, the creatures of the forest, they always came out of their homes and moved towards the sound of the drums. The lion came, the elephant came, so did the leopard, the hyena, the giraffe, and even the snake slithered quietly through the leaves to join the others. And they all sat down peacefully, right beside the hare, the tortoise, and all other small animals. And none of them wanted to kill each other or eat each other. Right? So the birds flew down to join them, and from the branches of trees. And none of the creatures made any sound while the drums were being played. They all just sat listening to the beating of these drums, and waiting to see if the little girl might have any orders for them to obey. And, but Kuda had nothing. She would just beat the drums. And when the beating stopped and the last echoes of the sound just died away, that's when the creatures just moved back to their homes quietly. And so one evening, Kuda returned from, beating her magic drums in the bush. And she found the women of the village waiting for her. They were all very angry. They said, "Where have you been? We've been searching for you. We're looking for you. You had to look after our babies because we wanted to go down to the river to bathe. And it's really selfish of you to wander away. Don't you realize we might want you?" And this finally just made Kuda very angry. And she said, this time they must be punished, because she'd been putting up with their cruel words for so long, right? And she knew that there was a way in which she could make them, feel very sorry. And so next morning, when the women were at work and Kuda was back to, looking after the children, she took her drums and she started to beat them in the village, while everyone was away. And there was no sound except this strange music of these magic drums. And all the babies fell quiet, right? They didn't cry, they didn't speak a word. They all just sat listening to the beating of the drums. And soon Kuda rose and she walked down a pathway into the bush. She was still beating her drums, and all the children just followed her, making no sound as they went. And Kuda led them into a clearing in the bush, and there was a very sort of deep pool. She stood near the edge of the pool. She kept beating her drums, and the children gathered round her, listening to the beating, still making no sound. And Kuda smiled at them for a moment, and she nodded her head, towards the middle of the pool. And one by one, the children stepped forward to obey the wishes of this girl. They all just jumped into the pool, and the water just closed over them. Now, when the women of the village came back from work and found that all the babies were gone, they were very unhappy. And they started looking around, what's become of our children? And they started yelling at Kuda when they found her. And Kuda smiled and said, "Well, you won't see your babies again. Today, I beat my magic drums and led them to a deep pool in the forest. And then I made them all jump into the water. They've gone to a happy world where people are not cruel and selfish like you." Right? And the women heard this and they were very angry. And they went to complain to the headman of the village and said, "This girl must be punished. She deserves to die for what she's done." And the headman sent for Kuda. And she said, no, it's not I who deserves to be punished. These women always told me that I wasn't strong enough to work in the fields. And they said looking after the babies wasn't an important task for anyone. I mean, surely it's their own fault that their babies have been taken away. And then, before any of the people could really say anything to this, before they could even stop her, Kuda ran away into the bush. She was still carrying her 3 magic drums. She then went and jumped into the deep pool where the children had gone before her. And nobody ever saw her again. But it is said, storytellers sometimes tell you that in the evening, people think they hear the sound of drums underneath the water of the pool. And perhaps the animals hear it too, because large and small animals come to the pool and they all drink together, but they don't kill each other. So that's the story of Kuda and her magic drums. Artie, do you want to join in again? Hi.
Thank you so much for that. That is an intense story.
Yeah.
I'll just say, before we jump into our usual, it's a story. And in myths, fairy tales, and dream, when you see death, it is a symbol of transformation. So this child part of you is being transformed. And even more to the point, the story specifically says the water closed over them. It's not clear that they actually died.
Yeah.
So I just want to, sort of massage that a little bit. Okay, so I'll start by asking my usual question, which is, where do you enter into that story?
So for me, when I read it, the thing that just stood out for me was how all of the characters and all of the main people in the story were feminine, and this seemed like something that happened purely in the realm of the feminine. And such stories are rare, right? We've come across a few. We've done of Nettles and Roses, where it's about this beautiful daughter and the ugly daughter and the stepmother and all of these various feminine characters. So this is primarily something that happens within the feminine. So I was curious about that. So what is this thing that what's the story trying to say about the mechanics that happens in the feminine realm? So that was one. And the other thing was that although that this is a tradition, we've not done too many African folktales in sacred space, but when you take these folktales from across the world, you always have some kind of common themes, motifs, and things that remind you of other traditions as well. So for me, it was that this women of the village kind of poking at the so-called incompetence of this girl, and saying she was weak or she wasn't good enough, and all of those things, is very reminiscent of European folk tales, where it's always these three brothers, where the two older brothers are always nagging at the youngest one. Kind of just dismiss the youngest brother and say, "Oh, he's a dunce. He's good for nothing. Oh, he can't do anything." And
or Cinderella, the two older sisters, stepsisters, sort of abusing her.
Right? And it's always that the youngest, seemingly incapable one, who has this access to this magic realm, right? And they have something that nobody else has. And it's usually kept secret and all of those things. But so there is something that kind of reminded me of that. And Kuda here had her 3 magic drums, which again she played for no good reason. She, even though she could have anything she wanted, if she played magic drums, really would give her anything, but she didn't. She didn't ask for it. So that's really what resonated with me. Like there is that element of that pure third sibling kind of a dynamic here. So that's where I and to respond to something you said about just earlier, how it's just so amazing that we come across these things where the stories actually don't tell you. If you look at the words, what they say, you just assume that the children jumped into the pool and died. The story doesn't say that, right? It says they went into the pool and the water covered over them. And then Kuda
Yeah.
says, they've gone to a place where there is no selfishness and cruelty.
Right.
So you almost feel the sense that they've just gone to another realm and they chose to stay there. It's just that they're not
Yeah.
here.
In the Judeo-Christian, we'd be like, oh, you killed them and they went to heaven. And, we don't.
Yeah,
typically...
but it doesn't say anywhere. Right. So I love how, these folk tales kind of just preserve those details. And if you kind of look at the words, they don't really say what you think they say. Right.
Right.
So that's just amazing. And then
it's like you have to have eyes to be able to see, like, what is actually being revealed.
Yeah. So you'll give us the symbols and motifs. I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you for that. I totally agree. And when we talked about this and brainstormed it together, you're absolutely right. I mean, the thing for us that really emerged out of this is that this motif, this archetype of the exile, right? Kuda as the exile, the third brother or Cinderella as the exile, Snow White as the exile. In the Christian system, right? Christ as the exile, right? The Frog and the Princess, the Frog as the exile. Hunchback of Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera. And what I love about this is that this obscure, sort of completely out of print, you need to go digging, led by your amazing muse, obviously, right, to find the story. It's not just sort of the accessible sort of African sort of folk tradition, but truly obscure. And what we see here are dynamics that, we're not going to homogenize sort of global cultures, but it's like the core human physics, very similar to what we've seen in Northern European folktales, in indigenous American folktales, in Japanese folktales, Indian folktales. And in a sense, it's the story itself, through you, has been recovered from exile, right? And to sort of draw this golden thread of, like, there is this, just like regardless of your human tradition, we all have, eyes, ears, noses, mouths, livers, right? And in exactly the same way, this, like, dynamic of the exile is not ethnically, culturally specific, but it is human. It is human. And so I love the opportunity to go at it from this angle. So mythopoetically, so I'll just take a minute to explain how we read these stories. So around here, when we read dreams, fairy tale, myth, in our healing work, we read them mythopoetically. And all that means is just a fancy word for saying we regard every major actor in the story as being a symbol of a different part of your own inner self, right? So Kuda is a symbol of you. The children is a symbol of another part of you. The bullying women of the village is another part of you. Right? The headman is a part of you. The deep well or the pool of transformation, grief, is another symbol of a part of you. And so the way we take nourishment from a story like this is to start at, t equals 0, right? Sort of time equals 0, beginning, initial position, hit the play button, allow things to sort of unfold and spool out from there. And then you look out for who's doing what to whom, whose position gets improved or degraded over time. And you take sort of message from that. Okay. And so mythopoetically, I totally agree with Gary. This is a story centering on the inner feminine, but very interestingly, not the inner feminine as exiled by the patriarchal inner masculine, right? But the inner feminine itself bullying and shaming and exiling a part of its own inner self. So we're like, well, what's going on here? Right. So when we teach about feminine and masculine, they're not gendered in terms of like the gross sort of material outer world. We think of masculine and feminine as principles within each human being, each being actually. But for now, we'll just talk about human, where we all have masculine and feminine within us, right? I identify as, a man, but I have masculine and feminine. And very quickly, the major functions of the masculine and feminine are that the masculine is protection, and then outbound manifestation, boundary control, and then the feminine is nurturing, but also vision, right? So the feminine is where you get your vision from. So the Greek muses are all feminine, right? They're the nine muses, the daughter of the three graces. There's not, there's not a god, a masculine god among any of them. And that's for a reason, right? The vision comes from the feminine. And then she hands the blueprint over to the masculine, and he gets to work manifesting all of it. Now, again, this is not a gendered thing where it's like women should do this, men should do that. It's like all men have both within them. All women have both within them. And when we talk about relationships, when we talk about healing, there's a whole thing we do around like, so in a person, right, is this man masculine dominant or feminine dominant? And what does that mean, right? In this woman, in this gender fluid, gender non-binary person, you still have sort of masculine and feminine, because it's not a gender thing. It's just you can call them yin yang, you can call them whatever. But we revert to masculine and feminine because when you see it in a dream or in a folktale, there's a girl or woman, and her name is Kuda. She's the symbol of, you could say she's the symbol of the yin element. But when they show up in dreams, they show up as these figures. So we just kind of, surrender and roll with it. So here then, the women, the dominant women of the village, right? If you think about it, these women, there's something off with the feminine in this situation at the beginning of the story, right? Because if we think about feminine, there are sort of baseline sort of functions within you, right? Within you. So I could be a man, I could have this dream, and this will tell me something about my own inner feminine. Okay. So in my own inner feminine reading this, the feminine is supposed to provide nurturing and vision. And here the dominant women of the village provide neither, right? They go out and they do the crops, and technically they help you survive. But beyond that, it's like, you think about how they treat their children. It's like you would not necessarily be that excited to be, the son or daughter of one of these women, right? And so they have no nurturing, they have no vision, certainly. They just do their duty. They're kind of in zombie mode. They're working in the fields. They're not very happy about it, it seems like. But they do it, and the world is very ordered. This is kind of like in real life where you go to work, you get your paycheck, you're not very happy, you have no vision. When you come home, you have nothing left, there's no nurturing, right? So no nurturing, no vision. And again, this is regardless of your outer declared gender, right? This is just within any human. So they technically grow crops and provide sustenance, but there's no real feeling behind it. Okay. And so I'm like, where are you getting all this narrative? So for me, the thing that gives away this state of affairs, that there's no feeling behind it, is how they treat Kuda and their own children, right? So this is not a moralistic allegory. Oh, you should be nice to your kids. You should have work-life balance. You shouldn't just work in the office all day. You should make time for your kids. The kids and Kuda are also symbols of other parts of you, right? This battle and conflict between the dominant women of the village and Kuda and their own children is like a conflict, like a cancerous conflict within your own body between your heart, liver, and lungs, right? They all need to get along or there's just no moving forward, okay? And so the situation here is that there is a dominant part of you that is feminine, that is not fulfilling their full function. And the parts that would help it fulfill the function, because the nurturing for you, the whole point of your ability to nurture is to nurture your own inner child. And just to be very precise about that, I don't mean the psychological inner child we talk about. But when you see children and babies in dreams, they are a symbol of like the new growth within you, right? They are the emerging 2.0 version of you, the next chapter or phase of your life, right? And so, I mean, actually, in the psychological, if you don't take care of your little inner child, and in psych, it tends to be very historical, like who did what to me as a child, what the trauma was, all of that's valid, right? But where it ties back to something like this is that if you don't take care of your own inner child, there is no future growth, right? And we care about the past, who did what to whom and whose fault it was and everything, but not because we're, going to sue people and put them in. I mean, that may happen, but that's not the end of it, right? We're doing all that so that we can unblock the forward growth in our lives because, I mean, if you were wounded by someone when you were young, it's because they were stunted in their own growth. I mean, these dominant women of the village, they're stunted in their own growth. That's why they dump on Kuda and their own kids. Okay. So healing unblocks bliss in a nutshell. Okay. So there's this bully exile thing set up here where the dominant women of the village are bullying and then exiling, not even the masculine, but a part of the feminine itself. Right? It's like 80% of your liver is like exiling another 20% of your liver. Right? And normally you'd think, well, if I take a piece out of my liver, I can still survive. And it's like, that's not the point. The point is like, why are they focusing on this part? And why would you give up any part of yourself anyway? Right? And here, it's not even a simple exile, like go, get out of my sight, go into the woods. We never want to see you again. It's even worse. The exile here isn't even fully exiled. Instead of just going away, they say instead, we're going to keep you here. We're going to stuff you down and still exploit you for what you can do for us. Okay. And what would be an example of an inner dynamic like this within you, within me, within a person, reflecting in the outer world? It would be something like, if you were an artist, let's say you're a musician, right? And you don't just like forsake music and go be a lawyer or a stockbroker, right? Nothing wrong with that, right? But it's even worse in some sense, where you do play music, right? But you don't play what your muse tells you to play, right? You still take your talent, harness it, and exploit it. And you play music only for prestige and money, right? Which in some sense is even worse. It's like, if you're going to play music and only for prestige and money, it's like adding insult to injury. It's like, you may as well like stop doing that and just go be a crypto high-tech dude, right? Why are you even bothering? If you're doing it all for prestige and money, there are way easier ways to make prestige and money, right? So if you're going to do that, let's just do it. But if you're going to do music for its own reason, which is not prestige and money, right? Playing the wrong music for the wrong reasons, you may as well not play it all, right? So here you're using music to grow crops with no spirit. Okay. Now, it's not wrong to make money and prestige using your talent, your muse talents. But ideally, when you do that, it is ultimately in the service of bliss, right? So in other words, how would that look in this village if everything was aligned to the service of bliss? Well, obviously, Kuda is the holder of vision, even within the feminine. She owns the drums. She's the weak one, which is actually the most powerful one. Right? She's not like, oh, she's actually equal to the other women in the village and, they just don't realize it. With her drums, she's not equal. She is the highest, right? So the lowest is not equal. The lowest is actually the highest in disguise. Said another way, the frog in The Princess and the Frog is not just a good guy and sort of member of the royal court. The frog, the lowest, is actually Prince Charming himself. Right. In the Greek system, the Minotaur, right, at the center of the labyrinth, this like monstrosity that everyone fears. His name is Asterion, which means star, right, which is this glimmering sort of hint that the lowest is actually the highest. Right, so how would this happen in the village? It could be the village women saying, yeah, we're going to go out, work all day long in the fields, grow the crops. You watch the kids. And when we come back, first of all, we thank you for watching the kids. We put food on the table. And then at dinner time, you play your music, right? And you provide us with spiritual nourishment. And we thank you. We nourish each other. It's not like don't grow crops. If you did that, you were going to starve, right? But the whole point is a part of you does go out and grow crops, and a part of you does provide spiritual nourishment, and everyone is honored, right? Everyone is honored. So in the ridiculous, I apologize, stockbroker example, right? You would go out, you would work for money if your music doesn't make money, and then you would come home and you would still play music, but not play music for money and prestige. You would play music for music itself, right? And one funds the other, right? So in that sense, your stockbroking becomes a part of your bliss because it is part of, right? So when you're a singer, right, your liver is a part of your singing art, because without your liver, none of you would be here. It's not just your voice. Right, so here Kuda is not weak. She's actually all powerful. She holds the triple drum. Okay, the triple drum, that number 3 again, that controls all living beings. Boom. End of conversation. Right? There's no contest. No contest. Animals, by the way, in myths, dreams, and fairy tales are symbols of embodiment, sort of neck down, not the intellect, but your embodied self, your physicality, your sensuality, your sexuality, your instinct, and then sort of crossing over into your intuition as well. So when you exile this part of you, the animal part of you, right, it will make you, and your body literally is in conflict with you, in protest. It will make you fatigued. It will give you chronic pain. It will make you foggy-headed. It will make you sleep all day, because it is not in agreement, right, with the way you are sort of running things. Now, from your point of view, which is typically sort of the dominant point of view. So when you think about this, it's like the way you think about who I am is I am these women who work all day in the crops, doing real work in the real place. And everybody else is just silliness and fun and games. Okay. So from your point of view, your body is sabotaging you, quote unquote, because you can't get out of bed to go farm the crops in the field. Right. So it seems like self-sabotage. Okay. But there's a message in it. And the message is that what you've forgotten, my dear, is that the whole point of you going out and raising the crops, and the whole point of you going out and making money, doing something that's perhaps not your bliss right now, is to bring that money back, bring that nourishment back, to nourish the kids and this Kuda part of you. Right? That seems weak in the outer world because I can't make money, playing my music or whatever. But this music is, I mean, it's really the only unique part of you. Everything else is just, you're just a sort of identification number and a bank account or whatever. I mean, it's your spark, your bliss, your art is the thing that is truly unique about you. Okay. And in this case, it's the nastiest version. You're not even just pushing her out. You're keeping her and using her, but improperly. Right? That's the worst scenario of the exile. Okay. So, in the European fairy tales and folk tales, it's always the older brothers who are all like sort of pomp and, braggadocio. And, but they can't actually get the thing done, right? It's the third brother that comes through instinct, through intuition, through not worrying about money and prestige, that is able to sort of thread the needle. So the other dynamic here that's very interesting is that this Kuda part of you is the governess, the protector and nurturer of the children. Right? So when you're toiling in the field, you're not thinking about the next thing. You're just getting through the day. Right? You're like, well, maybe when I retire, I'll actually do what I want to do, but that's not the priority right now. I just need to sort of put food on the table. Right? But for people who say this, right, what often goes hand in glove is that they don't have any vision. So if you ask them, well, I mean, if you could do it right now, let's say I wave a magic wand, put $10 million in your bank account, what would you do? And they're like, I have no idea, because they don't even have vision. Right? So what they're saying is, when I retire, not I'm going to do what I want to do, but when I retire, I'll start the process of actually figuring it out. And that is, not to put too fine a point on it, but that's disaster, right? Without vision and not knowing what your bliss is, how do you even know it's not possible right now? Right? I mean, my recommendation is always, like, as early as possible, even as kids, let's turn over the cards, see what your bliss is as far as we can see. And then if it really is not going to make money and it's really going to be sort of, make you an outcast because this is what your bliss is, well, we'd like to know that earlier, wouldn't we? Right? So we can make a plan for how to get this out the door anyway, in the course of, your single, as Mary Oliver, the poet, would say, your one wild and precious life. I'm a business guy, right? If I'm going to be in a situation where I'm totally screwed, I would like to know as early as possible so I can make, sort of plans, and still complete my mission anyway. So, I mean, it's this thing that, and I hope you'll forgive me for speaking so plainly. It's like, this is not something I say in mixed company, right? So, like, for instance, when you go to cocktail parties and everyone's talking about, like, oh, what car I drive and what do you do for work, and et cetera, et cetera. You can't ask people what their bliss is, right? They just shut down. They're like, well, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. How about those Rams? Oh, look at what the stock market did. Look at what the president did about this, sort of COVID policy or not, right? I mean, these things, like, don't matter. But you can't talk about what matters because they haven't asked the question. They're just out in the fields all day. And it really will, I mean, you can't at a cocktail party ask a question that's going to plant a seed that's going to put them in crisis, right? Because they're on autopilot, just don't rock the boat, right? And the thing is, you're like, well, how do I know if they're in their bliss? When someone is in their bliss, you can tell. It's obvious, right? You can just tell by the way they move through the room, right? Their energy is completely different, right? So anyway, this Kuda part of you is put to work nurturing the children, the next part of you, which is potentially okay. Right? Because in the next generation, I would like more Kudas, right? I would like a larger percentage of my children, right? The future part of me to be focused on this sort of more divine, more blissful part, right? And the crops will get done, right? But the centricity, the accent of my life shifts a little bit. Okay. So we're still working in the fields to make money, and we're learning how to manage money because it's feeding my bliss. Even managing money, even paying my taxes, even filling my car with gasoline is a part of my bliss, because the ultimate rose that it allows to flower is my bliss. That would be fine, right? But that's not why they put her to work watching the children. They put her to work watching the children because it's not the highest priority, it's the lowest priority. And as a result, they, quote unquote, mythopoetically, symbolically, lose their children. Right? So the whole village, because of a lack of vision and exiling the highest, most powerful part of them, right? It's like a form of giving away your power, loses for lack of vision and exiling the most powerful part of you. Obviously, you lose your future. You lose your future. right? And even when it happens, you still call it self-sabotage, right? The exiled part of you takes your future potential, your children, right, and puts it in the water. And you're like, oh my gosh, you've murdered the children. It's like, nobody said that. Right? You can go into the water if you dare to go get them back. Nobody goes into the water. Well, you killed them and you're just going to go run off and do whatever. It's like, no. Kuda says, I'm going into the water too. And Kuda's not dead. You can still hear her drums beating, which means the children are down there. Right? So this gives away a lot of the physics of this sort of, if you've done healing work with me, we call it the lost board member. Right? The lost board member you never actually kill this exile or the children. If you did, they would not be able to self-sabotage you anymore. Right? They're always there. They're just locked away. And it's up to you to go into the water to get them back. Okay. Because think about it in the physics of the story. Where in the village, who in the village is the holder of the vision for the future? If it is not the feminine who owns the magic drums. Right? And these magic drums literally, right, command the obedience of every living thing in the realm. Animal and human, because the kids follow her. Right? The drums are a symbol of your bliss. When you beat the drum of your bliss, all of you, right, must obey, not should obey. There's no threat. It's just, when you're a musician or an artist, and it's not that you should do your art. It's like you must do your art. There's something in you that is just like overwhelmed, even in the face of loss of money and prestige and unhappy parents and unhappy in-laws. Right? It's like this imperative that comes like out of nowhere. Okay, another interesting detail is that when they confront her over making the kids go away, she has her drums, right? Or we keep saying she's the most powerful part of this entire thing. So a power with a profane lens, which is fear, threat, and control. You could be forgiven for asking, well, why doesn't the exile just beat her drums in the village and she can be the new head woman and force all of you fools to just sort of get in line with your bliss? Right? And you see this in story after story and in culture after culture. And there's a poem we'll read later that will touch the jugular of this as well, which is, if I'm within you, right, and I'm the holder of your bliss, right, the only way this bliss gets done is not through force. You have to see it for what it is. Until you actually see it for what it is, we cannot move forward. Because bliss is of the sacred, so there is no mechanism of fear, threat, and control. Right? Like Gary famously always says, the way you know it's your bliss is that when you don't do it, it doesn't hurt. Right? If there's something you like to do and you don't do it and it hurts, it's like if you like smoking cigarettes and you don't smoke and you start like trembling, right? That's not your bliss. Right? Bliss is the thing you do for no good reason. In other words, it doesn't help you in the realm of fear, threat, and control. You do it for no good reason. Even musicians, they start just playing their bliss and the world loves them. And then they're like, oh, and they start pandering to the crowd and then they lose their magic. Right? Because they're playing for a specific reason again. Okay. And so I can go on and on. I need to sort of move forward, but just to put a quick bookmark here. These physics of the exile pull in multiple themes from across all the live sacred space sessions we've done, like 70 of them at this point, and all the things I teach in Preside as a healer, right? And in a nutshell, it's all about this exile, right? When we talk about healing, it's all about the exile. Those of you who have done healing know. When we talk about bliss, it's about your bliss as the thing that has been exiled and how do we recover it. When we talk about healing from grief, right? And how we move through grief. It is all about going down into the hole, into this well, into this pool, come what may, and sitting with the exile. And this is what I love about mythopoetics and kind of human experience and human culture. This obscure African tale that Gowrie dug out of, the well, right? The dungeon, itself talks about the mechanics of exile and self-sabotage, and the physics are exactly the same. Just like the physics of your liver and your lungs are exactly the same, regardless of your culture. You stuff it down, even though it has power. And that power, right, then, because it's stuffed down, takes out your future, takes out the kids. And you see it as vengeance and self-sabotage, and she sees it as like, it's just the physics of it, right? This is not punishment, right? It's like saying, I'm going to cut my leg off. Oh, and now you're going to punish me by not letting me walk. And it's like, it's not punishment. You cut your leg off. What do you want me to do? Right? And by the way, the leg is in the pool of water, ready to come back anytime. But you have to see it. You have to ask it to come back. And my recommendation is, when you ask nice. Right? So this thing happens instantaneously in one motion. Okay. So another aspect I want to bring forward here is this idea of grief and exile that is closely sort of related to all of these physics. And the symbol of grief here is the pool of water deep in the forest. So in Grimm's Brothers, you see this all the time. So the deep, dark forest is a symbol of the unexplored regions of the self. That's where the exile goes, because you stuff it, in the back closet where like you don't even know what's back there. You don't want to know, but it is a part of your world, right? You just close the door on it. And in many traditions, a pool of water in the middle of the forest or the jungle is this symbol of grief, right? So when we talk about ocean and lakes, rivers, tsunamis coming at you in dreams, right? Floodwaters. The ocean is typically a symbol of the deep sort of emotional parts of you, where all of this insight in the form of whales, dolphins, et cetera, spring out, right? The salmon of the Celtic tradition, the fish in the Christian tradition, the Pope's hat is shaped like a salmon's head. It's called the mitre. All of these symbols. So across many different traditions, water in the ocean is this sort of source of deep insight, and then the fish that come out of it are the actual insights that come out. Okay. Where does this insight come from? What are the physics of getting all of this insight? The insight comes from grief, right? The wisdom comes from the grief you have experienced. Right? The ocean is also a symbol of grief. The salinity of the ocean matches exactly the salinity of human tears. Right? Any ocean is an ocean of tears. Right? In the Grimm brothers' story, Iron Hans, Iron John, which was popularized by the poet Robert Bly in the 90s with the book he wrote. Brilliant. When they go into the forest to find the wild man, he is in a pool of water. Right? They have to drain the swamp. They have to like bucket out all the water to actually find him, and then they bring him back in and put him in the cage in the castle. He's in the forest in a pool of water, right? Just like these kids, just like Kuda, because he is exiled and in grief. The pool is a pool of tears, right? Which is why the kids in the Kuda story, all your future potential, which you denigrate and deprioritize, they all get lost in grief, right? The exile, Kuda, the part of you that you shame as weak, which is actually in secret. It's kind of an open secret. It's kind of right in front of you, but is actually the most powerful part of you. In the end, goes in to join the kids in grief. Of course she does, because they are one and the same. right? You cut your leg off, you lose your ability to walk forward in life. You cut your kuda off, you lose your kids. It's not punishment or vengeance. It's just the physics of it. Right? So the mechanics of self-sabotage is that you take this weak part of you that everyone says is worthless, you exile it, and you lose all your future potential. In Preside, all the stuff I teach, it's all about the exile. Healing, all about the exile, and the lost board member, right? When we do the money program, it's all about money as the exile, money as your kuda. When we do the body program, it's not about how to cure your migraines or how to sort of cure this or that, another way of controlling my body, right? It's giving me the signal of migraine and I want to cure it and stuff it down. But rather, when we do the body program, it's about how your body is your kuda. It's being exiled or being kept and being stuffed down and misused. Right? And how do we read the signals of body ailments as the signals of the exile beating her drums? And how do we find the pool and how do we get her back? When we do the life decisions program, it's about stalemate between two parts of you, in this case, between kuda and the women. They are at stalemate. How do you resolve it? Because we all need to get together. Right? Just the girl and the kids with no crops, not going to work. Just the crops with no vision, no future, not going to work. In the bliss program, bliss is the exile, right? Where we go into your childhood to read clues about your bliss, which is very uncomfortable, but that's where the pressure point is. Okay, so the exile is in grief. They are underwater. They're not dead. You can still hear them through the drum beating. Your money, when you exile it, it's still blocked. You feel the sabotage of your money flow being blocked, right? Or you do make money, but in the wrong way, which is like soul destroying, right? Even worse in some ways. Your body is not dead; it's still there. You're still feeling the migraines, right? And you still feel the low energy. You can't get out of bed. And these exile parts of you are basically, they have their arm on the emergency brake of the train of your life, and they're just waiting for you to get a clue and then come get them. Right? When are you going to get the clue that this quote unquote weakest part of you is actually the most powerful part of you? You hate your body. Oh, my body doesn't look right. It doesn't do the right thing. It's like your body is how you like exist and experience the world. Every rainbow you see, every sunset, every glass of wine you enjoy, every feeling of like the bed sheets on your skin is from your body, giving you gifts every second of your life. And you're like, oh, my chin doesn't look right, right? I have fat on my, right? Come on, right? And unlocking your body gives you vision. Unlocking money gives you vision. So anyway, when you become sensitized to this whole exile thing, you start to see it everywhere. You start to see it in yourself, your own exiled parts. How do you get them back? And the exile, your kuda, may not even want to talk to you at first, right? Because she is so pissed, right? Why wouldn't she be pissed, right? How do you make amends? And knowing full well that in the future you will probably betray them again, because that's just how it works, right? It's just like St. Peter in the Passion of the Christ, over and over again, right? You will deny me 3 times before the cock crows. And it's like, no, absolutely not. And in the moment, oh yeah, never met the guy. I don't even know him. It's not me. Okay. So I feel like I'm not really using, it's hard to put in words something in this amount of time that just encapsulates the whole thing. It's more of a feeling I'm trying to sort of get across to you. And then the mechanics of how we do it, that's basically, in some ways, what I've dedicated all of my work to, right? But when I was brainstorming this with Gowrie, my muse sort of brought back to me a poem that I always associate with these dynamics of the exile. And I've had this poem with me in mind for Live Sacred Space since the beginning, since like a year and a half, I guess 2 years ago. And I haven't quite found the right session to share it, and I think this is the session. Okay. So I'm going to read this poem. To me, this is a poem about the exile. And I'll do my usual. We haven't read a poem in a while. I'll read it once and give you all my color commentary. And then I'll read it again cleanly with no interruption, so you get the full sort of oomph of it. There's a poem written in the early 90s, I think, by a poet, a man by the name of Lawrence Raab, R-A-A-B. And the name of this poem is The Sudden Appearance of a Monster at a Window. Okay. And obviously, the monster is your exile. I'll read this poem for you now. Yes, his face really is so terrible. You cannot look away. And only that thin sheet of glass between you, clouding with his breath. Behind him, the dark scribbles of trees in the orchard, where you walked alone just an hour ago, after the storm had passed, watching water drip from the gnarled branches, stepping carefully over the sodden fruit. So he was like right there. He's right on your property. He's around all the time. At any moment, he could put his fist right through that window. And on your side, you could grab hold of this letter opener. Or even now, try very slowly to slide the revolver out of the drawer of the desk in front of you. Right, so you're at stalemate with him and you're ready to fight. The first thought on your mind is like, how, if he puts his fist through that window, how am I going to kill him? But none of this will happen. Not because you feel sorry for him or detect in his scarred face some helplessness that shows in your own as compassion. You will never know what he wanted, what he might have done, since this thing of its own accord turns away. And because yours is a life in which such a monster cannot figure for long, you compose yourself and return to your letter about the storm, how it bent the apple trees so low, they dragged on the ground, ruining the harvest. That's it. So, this is a poem about Kuda and the village women, isn't it? Right? I guess the thing that really sort of grabs me about this is that even at the end of the poem, when this monster that is clearly tracking you right outside your door, right? It's in the apple orchard. You were just there an hour ago, and it's right there. It probably could have like taken you down when you were in the apple orchard. You don't stop to think why it didn't take you down. It shows up at your window looking at you, and its face is all scarred probably from you whipping it. Right? And it's clouding the window. And you're like, it's so powerful, right? Kuda with the 3 drums, it's so powerful. This thing could kill me. And all you can think about, do I stab it with a letter opener? Do I shoot it? Can I get the gun in time so I can shoot this effing horrible thing? And it hasn't even snarled at you. Right? Will it put its fist through the window? That's you talking, not him. And he looks at you and he can tell this is not the day you're going to finally realize. And he turns away and just goes back into exile, back into the pool of grief. And for you, because you live your shiny life of prestige and everything put together, you go back to the letter you were writing to your friend. And when you write the letter, you talk about the storm and how it bent the apple trees. Remember the golden apples, those stories? Apple is a sign of wisdom. The wisdom is being dragged on the ground and the harvest is ruined of this wisdom. You missed your window. You missed your shot yet again with your exile and all your wisdom. So the apples are like the children. All your wisdom, your future potential, vision out the window. So you write about, oh, how I'm stuck in life. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel so like self-sabotaged. And even in your letter that you go back to, right, 10 seconds after this confrontation, in the letter, you don't even mention the monster. That's how exiled he is. Right? So the storm here is grief, the grief ruining, quote unquote, the harvest. We blame the monster for everything. We blame the monster for like ruining, the apples and everything else. When the real problem is that the monster is exiled in the first place. Right? So we read this poem mythopoetically. The monster is a part of you. Why is it scarred? Why is it outside the home? Why is it not in your home? It's a part of you. Right? This monster is Kuda. It is the girl with the triple drums. The key to everything is to realize this and to recover it. Your creativity can be the exile. Your sensitivity can be the exile. The power of your voice can be the exile. Right? As Carl Jung once said, and I don't agree with this quote exactly, but it speaks to the point. And to paraphrase, he said, any part of you whom you do not love will become hostile to you. That is the mechanism of self-sabotage. I don't agree with how he put the quote, because when your reaction, when you hear, oh, it will become hostile to you, your reaction is, well, where's my gun? Let me grab the letter opener. So I'm just like, hang on, right? This part of you, let's not talk about the hostile part. Let's talk about the whom you do not love part. Right? It's hurt and exiled. And by the way, continues to love you without condition. Kuda continues to watch the kids, waiting for you to get a clue. And then one day you come back and she's just, it's like the last straw. She can't take it anymore. But even then, she doesn't kill your kids. She just takes them into the well of grief, where you fear to go. How do I cure grief? How do I get over grief as fast as possible? I need to get on with the rest of my life. And it's like, without going into the pool of grief, there is no rest of your life. And if I forced you into the pool, that doesn't count. You have to see it and go down willingly. If you're grabbed into the pool, that's depression, that's not grief. There's a difference. Right? When you decide this monster is your own, that this monster is as much your child as any other child, screw the apples, I want the monster. You will go into the apple orchard and go looking for him. And you won't be holding a gun. You'll be holding donuts and chocolate, right? And a towel and a hot meal to go get your monster back. Right? Once you flip into this mode of like, I got to get my monster back, you are not the victim anymore. You're not the helpless child. You are the mother now. You are the father now. You are the parent. And it's like, my child is out there. I'm going to go get it back. My exile is out there. I will go get it back. Okay, so let me, as promised, after all that color commentary, let me read the poem again with no interruption so you can feel it cleanly. This is The Sudden Appearance of a Monster at a Window by Lawrence Raab. Yes, his face really is so terrible, you cannot look away. And only that thin sheet of glass behind you, between you, clouding with his breath. Behind him, the dark scribbles of trees in the orchard where you walked alone just an hour ago, after the storm had passed, watching water drip from the gnarled branches, stepping carefully over the sodden fruit. At any moment, he could put his fist right through that window. And on your side, you could grab hold of this letter opener, or even now try very slowly to slide the revolver out of the drawer of the desk in front of you. But none of this will happen. And not because you feel sorry for him or detect in his scarred face some helplessness that shows in your own as compassion. You will never know what he wanted, what he might have done, since this thing of its own accord turns away. And because yours is a life in which such a monster cannot figure for long, you compose yourself and return to your letter about the storm, how it bent the apple trees so low, they dragged on the ground, ruining the harvest. Okay, that's it. Okay, so those are all the notes I had. Gary, do you want to come back on screen and share any additional points?
Hi, Artie. Thank you for
Hello.
that point. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
What
do you
think?
So anything to add? Yeah.
So the point that occurred to me when you were reading the poem and talking about exile is the thing that comes in the story about the magic drums, right, is that when she has the power, the magic drums give her the power to get anything she wants, right? To order about, to control, and all of those things, but she doesn't do any of that. And she keeps beating the drums. And what it does, the effect it has, is that all the animals of the forest come together, sit in silence, and sit in harmony.
I love that. Yes.
Right? And that's what continues to happen even once she goes down into the pool. The animals can still hear the music sometimes, and they still go to the pool and they sit around, they drink water from the pool, and they don't kill each other. That the story makes a point to say that at the end. Right? So it's the coming together of all the different parts of you, and that's what she's doing with the drums.
Right.
She's really calling everyone together for harmony. And somehow that, it's just, when we're talking about exile and then looking at what those drums do, I think that's what she's trying to say.
I love that. So, if the drums, the way I internalize that is if the drums are your bliss, are the source of your vision, are the source of all your power, they call all the animals to get all the forces within you. Right. And explicitly, the animals don't kill each other. It's, to me, because in the zone of your bliss, it is a sacred zone. Right? There is no fear, threat, or control. This is like in the Christian system where it's like the lion will lie down with the lamb. right? And the lion will not like rip the lamb apart, which is what the lion would normally do. Right? It's a sacred zone. It's a zone devoid of fear, threat, and control. That's why in sacred space we don't sell things, right? There's nothing wrong with selling things, but it's like when we're playing poker and we're like, angling for like, oh, here's this shiny thing and what's the price, or give me a discount or whatever. That's all totally valid, but it's like the way we're playing this game is through fear, threat, and control. Like in the marketplace, I find it's too expensive. I walk away and I threaten to not do the deal. And the hawker's like, okay, sir, come back. Let me feed my family, and it's all this sort of, is it true? Is it just an act? And this is fear, threat, and control. And that's fine. That's a lot of the world. But in this special zone, it is devoid of fear, threat, and control. Because your bliss is from the sacred. And that's why you exile it. This monster is the holder of your bliss. What is the bliss of your life? It's in a piece of paper written down in his pocket. And it's like, oh, if I want to go out, I want to kill the monster and take the piece of paper from him. When you open the piece of paper, what is it going to say? It's going to say, do what the monster tells you. This is the guy I sent you. Do what he tells you. And it's like, oh, I just killed him. Okay, now what do I do? But of course, the monster will come back. You can't kill the monster. If you could kill the monster, we wouldn't need healing.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point, because that brings me to the question here that I saw on Facebook Live is how can I know what is my bliss? And I think it comes from a space where you say, if it doesn't hurt you, if you're not doing it, then how do you even have a clue? Like how do you know what your bliss is? So
I mean, there are past sessions. I'll just keep it within sacred space. There are past sacred space sessions where we talk about your bliss and I mean, there's like hundreds of hours of stuff around there. It is a focus of some of the work we do, as well as just healers and advisors. But I'll give you a quick sort of just thumbnail right now, which is the thing that is your bliss is within you, like a river, or like the lines of grain in wood, right? So when a tree branch falls down and the branch is like this, and you cut it lengthwise, right? And you open it up, there are these beautiful lines of grain in the wood, right? And the thing about your bliss, it's like that. It is beautiful, it is natural, but it is what it is. You don't get to choose. Right? You're like, I like that, I don't like that. It's like, you don't get to choose. Right? And there's an intrinsic aesthetic beauty to that, which is devoid of intention, i.e. devoid of fear, threat, and control. To the point where in our world where we can make anything look like anything, we still prize furniture where it's wood, it's natural, and you see the natural grain in the wood. In fact, plastic fake furniture, we put in stuff that looks like, lines of grain in wood. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason it is intrinsically beautiful to us. Because it resonates with something that is already within us. So within you have lines of grain in wood that flow like a river. Okay. One of the best ways to sort of get a feel for what your river is doing. So like, what is the content of what is the character of this river? So what am I doing when I'm flowing in the river? You kind of know already, right? But just to try to give you some words to this. When you were a child, right? And you were at home, stuck at home for the summer, doing nothing, bored out of your mind, what did you end up doing? right? What is the thing you do for no good reason? So there's all these things you do for money, prestige, the in-laws, your spouse, whatever, expectations. That's fine. That's fine. There's a place for all that. But when you have another different space where you can do whatever you want, what do you find yourself doing? And within that, how much of that is stuff that hurts if you stop doing it? Like, well, you know, I'm a doctor, I'm a tech guy, but on the weekends, I love to go like sort of cycling with my tech buddies, right? And I get exercise and I get to network, haha. Right, I killed two birds with one stone. So it's like, okay, so if you stopped exercising, would it hurt? Well, yeah, it would hurt because I'm not going to get all my deals done because the guys will like think I don't want to hang out with them anymore. Okay, so that doesn't count as your bliss. Right? What is the thing you do for no good reason? In other words, what is the thing you do that you love to do? When you're doing it, like someone taps you on the shoulder, asks you what your name is, you don't know. And someone says, you know, how are you going to make money doing that? You're like, and your answer is, huh? What?
Yeah.
Right? And then if you don't do it, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
It's like the thing, it's like the poem I just read. You know, I love reading poetry. Like maybe you love listening to it. But like I guarantee you after the session is over in like 2 or 3 minutes, you will completely forget the poem. You know, we haven't read a poem here in probably close to a year. Right? And it didn't hurt that we didn't read the poem. Right? It didn't hurt at all. And yet after we read the poem, I'm like, you know, we're all just like feeling good and flowing. And we will forget again.
Yeah.
Right? That's just how it works. So with that as the nature of bliss, it's like a dream, it vaporizes, and yet it's the key to everything. Right? So when you're in this 99% profane world, modern world, where everything is fear, threat, and control, there literally is no space, right, for you to even hold an empty space with no, like, this is why people are like, teach me how to meditate. I hear it's good for me. And I'm like, if you're going to meditate because it's good for you, I have no interest in teaching you. Right? You don't meditate because it's good for you. Well, why do you meditate? It's like, well, I guess technically the only words I can use is you meditate for no good reason. Well, why would I do that? It's like, I don't know. Right? But when you go down into meditation for no good reason, not trying to clear your mind or lower your blood pressure or be a better person or elevate your spirituality and consciousness, those are all fear, threat, and control.
Yeah.
Evolve, heal, raise my vibration, fear, threat, control. So that's why when you meditate, the first half hour is just letting all that settle. And then if you're, meditating for another hour after that, that's when we get to the good stuff. When the drums start playing and like the lion lays down with the lamb. You feel your body and you feel all the ways, you notice all the ways you criticize your body usually. And there is no criticism. The lion lays down with the lamb. And then in that zone, stuff starts to happen. Your bliss starts to like pop forward. And you're like, oh, you're in the river. And you start looking around going like, oh, okay, is this bigger than a bread box? What is this? Is it music? Is it whatever? What is it? And you start to know. And then from that fairy world of the sacred, right, that's when you bring the treasure back into the village. And you set up shop and you're like, I'm a poet. How are you going to make money doing that? Nobody pays for poetry. It's like, all right, I'll go work in the field growing crops, and then I'll come home. I'll make a little less money than I otherwise would have, and I'll make space for my poetry. like I guess I'm talking about the example I always bring up of William Stafford, right, from those early sacred space sessions.
Yeah.
Where he'd get up at 5 a.m. just to have an hour to write his poetry, and then he'd go out and do all the other stuff. Yeah, I think the beautiful thing is, even with bliss, there is no fear, threat, and control. So you're like, oh my gosh, I'm already 23, I don't even know my bliss. Oh my gosh, I'm already 63, I don't even know my bliss. It doesn't matter, right? There is no, it's a lifelong sort of blossoming and unfolding. Your bliss is basically your meaning and purpose in life, right? So if even you do your bliss for 10 minutes, right, and you fully express your bliss, you're done. Everything else is gravy. But because, again, your bliss is for no good reason. So it's not your bliss in order so for me, my bliss is like healing related, nerdy, mythopoetic stuff, right? Just being on this LSS, I'm basically done. I'm expressing my bliss. The result of how many people we reach, or do we heal people, does it work, does it not work, that's completely beside the point. So there's no more fear, threat, and control. I'm done. And then every additional minute I get to be here with you is just pure hooray and gravy. Right. And so it's like that flower that blossoms for only an hour in the middle of the jungle. Right? Even if nobody ever sees the flower blossom, well, the flower doesn't care. Right? The flower is doing what the flower does, and whether it makes money or prestige or people around to cheer, it cares not at all. It's doing it, and then it withers, and then it's like, hooray. So yeah, that's a long answer.
Thank you for that. So I'll also leave a link in the Facebook comments as well as here if anyone wants a link to sessions that we've done before. And there's the topics, you will have a lot of bliss related items as well. Like we've covered the organic path of bliss and, how bliss is linked to embodiment and things like that. So I think I can leave a link if it's helpful.
This is the YouTube link, right?
Yeah. So we also have all of those, sessions on YouTube now, all the past sessions. This session will go on YouTube as well. So I will just leave that link for everyone. And if you're interested.
Okay, so everyone, this is all Gowrie. So we need to give Gowrie a big thank you. She's taken all of the live Sacred Space sessions and chopped off the beginning Sacred Space setup, so you don't have to sit through that every time, and basically trimmed each video to like just the talk juice part of it and put them all on YouTube. And then the next phase is she's going to be chopping them up into like sub-clip topics, and that will be distributed out as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Artie. Yeah, so I'll take chapters as well, so you can just go directly to the chapter that you want to look at. So okay. I'll do that. So thank you for the bliss part, Artie. And do you have an exercise? Do you have a reflection question?
Yeah. Okay.
All right. We'll get to that.
Okay. So the exercise for this week, and again, the way we do our exercises here is that it's just a suggestion. There's no fear, threat, and control. There will be no quiz or test at the end. It's just something to think about. And the way I'd recommend doing this is to find, maybe 10, 15 minutes alone in your home, or if your home is like a very busy place, in your car. So when you drive out to get groceries, when you park the car, before you go into the grocery store, sit in your car alone for 10 minutes, get some pen and paper, and write out your answers to these questions. And it's only for your own self-reflection, okay? And all of this only if you want. So the exercise for this session is basically a very simple question, but basically the question that I have dedicated my life's work to. And the question is, what or who within you is your exile? Who is your inner exile? Okay. What is your inner monster? What is your inner Kuda? What is it asking you for? And once you hear the request, what will you do with this request? Will you sit there petrified, like the poet, waiting for it to go away? Will you numb, just like get on a phone call, get on Instagram, and get your dopamine hit, right, to sort of numb away the request and even presence of this exile? Or something else? What will you do? Now, keep in mind, this exile is the most powerful part of you. So some people are like, my exile is my confidence, my creativity, my nobility, right? And while that may be the case, eventually, the way the exile first presents to your consciousness is nothing anywhere near so noble, right? The monster face is scarred, terrifying. Your first reaction is, where's my gun? Right? So it's this thing that you yourself will think is a very ugly part of you, a very shameful part of you. And that is how the exile will present. Okay. Maybe nobility and creativity are all underneath that, but you've got to engage the dragon first to get invited into the cave where all the treasures are. Okay. And so the question is, what is your dragon? What is it asking you for? And when you hear this request, what will you do with this request? Okay. All right, so that's it. So that's what we have for this session. We'll end a little early. And to do that, I'll go ahead and close our sacred space. So our next session is next month. And I'll drop the link in Facebook and Crowdcast. It's free, open to the public. Sign up anytime you want. Invite your friends, again, only if you want. And we don't know the topic yet. We'll do our next brainstorm in a couple weeks. Okay. But I hope to see you all there. Everyone is warmly welcome. So now I'll go ahead and close our sacred space for the month. I hereby close the session of our shared sacred space. Thank you for holding this space with me and with us, and thank you for sharing the nourishment, the emotional nourishment, the spiritual nourishment of this shared sacred space with us. I give you my blessing. Go in peace, bestowed with blessing, free of undue fear, free of threat, and the undue control of others. Thank you so much. Happy Sunday. Have a great Sunday. Have a great week. Have a great month. And I'll see you all in the next session. Thank you.